I have some questions.
Certainly.
So,
certainly.
on page 50, there was a comment relative to the air monitoring, the accuracy and the air chamber, the amount of units per square footage. That has been illuminated several times in the past. And the response to that comment was the air monitoring equipment will be calibrated and maintained per the manufacturer's recommendations. So that really didn't answer my question about how many of these are on per square feet and how many are needed. It also says the air monitoring described in the RAW is consistent with DTS's regulations, policies, guidance, documents for remediating the sites that have been successfully implemented on thousands of sites. I bet those thousands of sites didn't have 2,000, at the rate of 2,000% more of the highly toxic VLG on the site, and if so, I would like to know. I requested, because I keep hearing this throughout the CEQA and the MND, DTS's regulations, policies, and guidance document and standards. They talk about standards. I've never seen a specific standard within any of the RAW, the CEQA, the MND, but they talk about it. So this policy and guidance and regulations and current standard document, it says. So I requested some information, and here's the answer I got. It said the RAW reflects the professional recommendations of our consultant, clearly consultants who have been in business for over 30 years and worked on more than 3,000 residential, commercial, and public works projects throughout the Bay Area, including more than 50 school districts in San Francisco. As professionals, Cleary is using education knowledge, past experience, regulations, etc., to inform their standards of practice. There are many DTS regulations, and I was given a site, and none of those had the current standard document that's talked about in throughout the MND and CEQA. I'm very leery of Cleary Consultant because on June 27th, the consultant couldn't even answer the accuracy of the unit, the air chamber size, how to calibrate the unit, and I specifically asked that with DTS on the line, and they couldn't answer it. So we're relying on a consultant that has 30 years in the industry that couldn't answer a question about a key air monitoring device. I find that to be pretty stunning. And on page 65, it still goes into the dust monitoring information during the earth moving, and it also talks about the 24-hour turnaround. And it talks about calibrating the units daily in there. And it talks about per the manufacturer. So the response is all air monitoring equipment will be calibrated and maintained per the manufacturer's recommendations. So nobody can answer what the manufacturer's recommendations are. So the fact is that these units need manual calibration every time the temperature changes a significant amount. That is not called out in any of the RAW. That is not called out in any of the CEQA. That is not called out in any of the MND. And this is the answer that was given. Again, the equipment will be calibrated per the manufacturer's recommendations, but none of that is indicated in any of this document. So how do we know that this is going to be calibrated per the manufacturer when it's not even illuminated in any of the documents. On page 100, this is probably one of the most significant items. It's in the MM6. The project will consist of excavation of contaminated soil. It goes on to say exposure factors include incidental ingestion, dermal contact, and inhalation. The mitigation should be adherence to all requirements set forth in the DTSC approved RAW. I don't see any of these adherence requirements in any of the documents. I also, it says the meter readings will be assessed using differences between the average upwind and downwind. The results of it compared to CARB, ambient air standard, for the PM10. So it's also saying in here, the California Air Resources Board and the United States EPA have adopted ambient air standards. So the experts are CARB. CARB and EPA are the experts. And it says, in accordance with CARB and EPA, construction of the proposed RA would not result in the emissions of criteria of air pollutants. So we can't answer the question of, do we have the sufficient amount of air monitors on the work site? Again, we're at the 11th hour now, and we still haven't got a sufficient answer. We haven't got a sufficient answer on, which is key. You have to calibrate these things accordingly, and none of this calibration is mentioned in any of the documents. Calibration is crucial to the plus and minus 5% accuracy that the manufacturer states. Nowhere is it illuminated in any of the documents. So you're not going to achieve the basic quality control that is really needed for this site. What's even more interesting, and I actually read this in front of the independent review panel for DTSC on August 9th. We're using the PMT methodology for this. So PMT 10, and if you have a PMT 2.5, there's a different methodology to use. But we're doing PM10. So the SOP mil-spec 16 is identified for PM10. This is outlined in CARB, the experts in the industry. And it specifically outlines quality control and the accuracy of the measurements. So there's no measurements in the ROAR or the CEQA of monitor detection drift methodology as outlined in CARB. Again, the SOP mil-spec 16. No mention in the ROAR or CEQA of replicate sampling, which serves to measure the precision of the analysis. No mention of in the ROAR or the CEQA of the duplicate sampling, which is a process of 10% of the samplings are analyzed to indicate reproducibility of the analysis, and more important, to monitor conditions like instrument drift. Again, we're talking about the accuracy of these units on this property. They're only identifying one in the upwind, two in the downwind, and we're not even adhering to quality control standard operating procedure that CARB outlines. There's no mention in the RAW of changing of the filters on the PDR unit, specifically wearing gloves without powder, so you don't contaminate the filter. There's no mention of that in any of the documentation. There's no mention in the RAW secret of the sample invalidation criteria relative to insects on or within the filter. That happens. And there's no mention of how to remove these insects with a Teflon forceps, and then make an analysis to either validate or invalidate. There's many more in this SOP, but we're talking about protecting our community during this remediation, and we can't effectively do this in a quality-like manner and I'm very, very concerned about it.
Gino, can I follow up with a question?
Sure.
If we could have staff clarify, I'm also very interested in terms of the monitoring. It's been a huge concern in the community. If there are promises made in the RAW about calibration, detection, that standards are going to be adhered to, how do our folks on the job site know that's happening? How can we assure that all of the standards are being met and all of that calibration is being done as we're laying it out? Who has that expertise to be able to hold the job site workers accountable to all of these specs?
So our quality control management, who's been a part of the discussions of the RAW and been involved in those conversations with the Department of Toxic Substance Control. Both of those agencies are on site as oversight. In addition, the district hires a third-party hygienist company, somebody like Cleary, it should be Cleary, to be on there at all times when activities are happening. That person is responsible for maintaining a logbook. The logbook includes things like measuring the wind, recording it, taking pictures of the activities that are happening. I'm sure if they were here, they could tell us exactly what's in that logbook. But the whole purpose is that the logbook serves as a record of the project. And so that is turned in along with BTSC's visits when they're there as part of the final documentation.
So the overseers have enough knowledge and expertise to be able to understand the standards that are being referred to me in the RAW and on a moment by moment basis, be able to say, that doesn't look right to me, or we need to stop, it needs to be recalibrated, or.
This is their profession. These are equipment that they are used to working with. This is not something that is new to them. They're used to calibrating equipment. They use this particular equipment in other projects, so it's not new equipment or new processes that they're used to these.
So,
Thank you.
so you are, and so, again, if part of that is true, why didn't the consultant answer those questions back in June? They said they have the 30 years of expertise, and they couldn't answer some of those simple questions. Why aren't these procedures outlined in any of the documents? I mean, are we supposed to just imagine that all this is happening? Are we going to take your word for it that Bay Area Quality Management Group is going to take this on? It doesn't say that in any of the documents, what you just said.
It states very clearly, actually, in MM6 that it's permitted through Bay Area Air Quality Control.
Right, but it doesn't state that they're going to interject themselves with the consultant and do all these things. So there's a lot of unknowns here. There's a lot of questions, and again, we're talking about protecting the community during this, and I challenge anybody in here to tell me that those units identified, the 2 or 3 units, are sufficient enough. That unit is not even on the CARB website as a operable unit, and CARB is the professional in this area. And so I don't take anybody's word anymore, not when it concerns the safety of the public.
Well, Gino, I hope we all do care about the community, and we're here because this is the plan to protect the community. So I would like to see them talk a little bit, because after the June 27th board meeting, we did have our consultant contact Thermo regarding your comments, because we weren't able to get the representatives named. So we did contact them directly and to validate what you had stated. Maybe you want to debrief what Chris gave us.
And maybe to be clear, the folks we have one person from a whole staff. They have a huge staff over at Clear Consultants, each with their specific training in each specific methodology. So to be completely fair, like for example, I won't know every single detail about everything they all do, but I know a cursory overview. So just to be clear on that one, and Chris, one of the senior partners of the firm. But we did follow up with the questions with your specific questions regarding the unit itself, to which we had 2 comments. One from, to echo what Kirsten said, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District reviewed the HASP, which is the Health and Safety Plan, which talks about the efficacy of the units, and they agree that not only is it good enough for the counts, which is one upwind, one downwind, and, sorry, I pull my notes from the sighting, one downwind, one upwind, along with a predominant wind direction, all to which will be coordinated with a meteorological station on site, not only effective for de-aldrin and pesticides, but for naturally occurring asbestos, which is even more toxic than de-aldrin. So they had confirmation from that from both the toxicologists, and they had sent me some supplemental data to that. But by DTSC's oversight, because they are the ones who actually approved the ROM, because they're the experts in the field, they were satisfied with that oversight with the AQ, so I just have to pass that forward. And then also to the two other comments that you mentioned, environmental guidance, and I had to look into that a little bit, how you were raising the question, because I had to look at myself. So there's 3 or 4, I actually imagined a litany of different reference manuals that all cross-reference each other as to the criteria and the thresholds. One of which was I think the one you were referencing was the environmental guidance document. So there's one guidance document for all of DTSC on their website, which talks about how they go about approving a project, so their methodology and how they actually create either raw, RAP, and then and reference that method and how that is accountable. And then there's other guidance reference guides which report up to that, which are, for example, the preliminary environmental assessment document. That is the guidance document, the guiding document for our ROC. So that was what was performed through the targeted site investigation, where they created a preliminary environmental document assessment. That is the guidance document for the RAW, if I'm following the wording correctly about that. And then 2 other things. One, you were mentioning and just to be, the way I'm understanding your question is that the question regarding the efficiency of the dust control, so that unit measures dust and particulates in the air. And I think Chris Chickanowski with Clery Consultant mentioned they're not a target, they're an upper limit threshold, so they never want to get even close to that. So there's a few different ways they manage, not just the units, which have very specific data towards the particulates, but also visual management of the site and other resources which are outlined in the law, which I don't know more than that. And then you also have the daily sampling, which is happening for the actual, what we do pull away from the site to tell not only how much we're collecting, if we're collecting any at all, which is the threshold, not even, regardless of if there's anything in the dust, it's just dust in general. Any dust in general, whether it be toxic or otherwise, is being metered on the site. And then also we're doing concurrent sampling to meter and just get data as we're ongoing throughout the project. So there's issue of dust, particulates, issue of the toxicity or presence of toxins within the dust, and then.
Thank you, Christina.
So, you're also indicating, thank you so much, I appreciate that, the fact that de-aldrin came back and there's no concrete answer until a document was discovered on the CARB site that's called Pesticides in the Air, which explains very precisely the wicking effect. And nobody can really explain why de-aldrin came back at a 2,000% rate between 2005 and 2014. And except this document explains the reason, the unknown that we've all been asking for. So if we're going to remediate now.
Let me correct that. That document is not specific to the site.
That's right, of course not.
Point of order, please let him proceed.
It's not specific to any site. It's explaining a very scientific, maybe you should read it, a very scientific explanation by experts in the industry how pesticides deep down in the soil wick their way up through the capillaries to the surface. Okay. This is why de-aldrin came back. There's no other explanation. De-aldrin is not used on crops. It will actually kill the crops. De-aldrin, contrary to what DTSC said, wasn't used to refarm, because if you certify the property free and clear, why would the owner recontaminate the property after 2005, knowing either there's residential or a school going to be built? Doesn't make any sense. Plus, de-aldrin will kill the crops. De-aldrin is a termite, I can tell you that. So here's the reason why I'm so concerned about all these things that I brought up. You may think I'm just bringing up things. We have a duty of obligation as board member to ensure that everything that's in these documents are true and correct. I've identified what I consider major holes in the documents. And I hear some answers, just like answers, the Santa Clara Valley Water District asked for a 14-day extension, and the answer that was given to that was absolutely unacceptable in my mind. So I look at this as my duty and obligation to do my due diligence, because if, God forbid, down the road that we're sued, I want to ensure that I myself is protected, because if whoever brings suit, if and when it happens, if you continue with the present road, because the Elgin is going to come back, if you do offload, the only solution here, the only solution is bioremediation to get rid of the Elgin, because that wicking effect is going to happen. So if I get sued personally, the district is not going to protect me legally, because if they prove negligence in some way, or prove that any of us didn't do our due diligence, okay, and if that's proven in court, our legal system in the district doesn't protect each of us. So I want to ensure, and I want to make it known, I'm doing everything I can to ensure that all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. And from what I could see in this document, this MND document throughout, it was stunning that the answers to every single agency was, well, you're really not correct, like the Santa Clara Valley Water District. And you don't need to know that, so we're going to waive the 14. We're not even going to extend you 14 days. So I'm very concerned. I'm very concerned about proceeding. I think we do need to take a step back and ensure the public that each of these things that were brought out are covered in a document that we can see, and be satisfied that all these things are going to take care of. I do have many other questions, but I'm going to defer so I can let some of the other trustees talk.
And maybe if I could just comment, because there's a few things you said there. One was, so just to, I don't know who was all in the room, but the previous method that was used, the voluntary cleanup action, I believe is what it was called, used bioremediation back in 2005 when it was certified clean. So the suggested method for this is the off-fall, which is what all the schools do in California. And so it's a different methodology. And the fact that they came back sort of was, I mean, for my mind, speculation. I mean, it's really hard to, figure that. All I know is the Elgin's bad, and it's there. And what is the most surefire way to try to prove that?
What was the bioremediation back in 2005? What specific bioremediation? What did they use?
Oh,
Precisely. They use a much different bioremediation process than they used in 2005.
Well, let's ask you then, what were the two different processes, the one recommended and the one in 2005?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
You said it's two different methods.
The bioremediation.
What were the two different methods?
The bioremediation today is drastically different than what was used in 2005.
Oh, how?
How's that?
They used different types. Back in 2005, I would have to, I forgot the name. It's called factor something, and they don't use that today. So technology has come about much more in almost 10 years.
So they did believe.
I'm sorry?
They did believe that the bioremediation cleared the soil at the time through bioremediation, and at this point, bioremediation could occur, but it is my recommendation that we actually remove the soil with the Elgin And that way, the bioremediation doesn't have a chance to fail.
But it's not pesticide free. So in other words, you're removing it down to the threshold, and that wicking effect in 2, 3, 4, 5 years is gonna wick back up again, okay? Because there's no answer as to why it wicked up prior, except through the process identified in that document that I pulled out. So you're right, let's take out the soil. The problem is you're leaving de-elgin in there. And that de-elgin, even if you put new soil back in, is gonna wick up to the surface again.
Well, to be fair, the assumption of, we can all surmise and speculate as to how the de-elgin got back, even to be fair, even if we don't agree with the DPSC. DPSC at the public hearing that they had said, they assumed that maybe some from the other homes, when they cut grade, they brought dirt from another area. I mean, I wasn't there, and I'm thinking it would just be kind of fair. And then I think the custom, the thing about bioremediation, it's custom every time you do it, so it can change with the year. They have to actually physically engineer whatever product they have for that moment. So we'll never, we'll never know the efficacy improvements as the product is being developed. So.
And in all fairness, when they did do the bioremediation, the confirmation samples, 5 of them still had de-elgin in them, ranging from 1.2 to 1.8 kgs. So it wasn't pesticide free even after the bioremediation.
President, would you like to?
Yeah, sorry, I'll let you.
I have a lot of things to say, but at this point, I'd just like to make a very simple comment. I spoke to Milan Sonko, who, as you know, is the project manager. And I said, Milan, why is it that we have selected the off-fall method when we see the incredible concern that there is in the community in terms of the air quality that I think President Borgioli has done an outstanding job of drilling down and really exposing the fact that the people that we've talked to so far have absolutely no idea how this is going to go. Absolutely no idea. And we know from the FSTAR study about how can you get, as a human being, how can you get exposed to de-elgins basically through the air. They can come into your eye, in your skin, you can breathe it in. It could maybe fall on some food in your garden. And so I think the work that I really want to applaud Citizen Trustee Borgioli for the outstanding work that you've done. We have absolutely no coherent explanation from the regulator as to why this happened. That in and of itself should give us pause. This is very, very serious. And so I talked to Milan Sonko. I said, why is it that we're using off-fall? Why aren't we using bioremediation? Is that not the proven technique? She said, absolutely. We're all for bioremediation. And I said, well, why is it? And she said, it's because the district gave us a project schedule that was very aggressive. A project schedule that was very aggressive. That's why. And I also asked her, I said, has bioremediation changed at all between 2005 and today? So, absolutely. It's a whole different science. It's kind of like using whatever the predecessor to the flip phone was, and trying to use that today as a cell phone. Technology is rapidly advancing. So I just want to make that one comment. I have many other things to say, but I'll just pause here because I totally agree with what President Borgioli has said. And there's been absolutely no. It's interesting in the document here in this rebuttal to citizen comments in the mitigated negative declaration that they don't even address this. They don't address it because they don't have an answer, and that's consistent throughout this document. They walk away again and again and again by giving no responses, by referring to old data, such as the old EPA standard of the 0.034 mg/kg as a screening level for de-elgin. Well, Dr. Hank Tenicus, I've tried to encourage somebody to read his research. He's one of the top toxicologists in Europe. He is the one who's talking about how the overuse of pesticides in agriculture are leading to the disappearance of birds and bees, and finally us. And for us, from a moral standpoint, to disturb this land by using off-haul method? Are we crazy? When we have other means that the DTSC, that some people like to say is the great expertise in this area, they say it's an absolutely proven technology, and the only reason that we're doing this is because the district has told them that they have an aggressive construction schedule.
Actually, that's not true. I'm making the recommendation, and we have the choice to make it on off-haul or bioremediation, and it's my recommendation. It's off-haul.
Well, your recommendation is absolutely the wrong recommendation, and you're endangering the community. There's no one in the community that wants this. These people on a Friday night, why are we meeting on a Friday night?
I think we're getting off the topic.
No,
We're
excuse me,
meeting
I
on
have
Friday
the
night.
floor.
But
I have
Dr.
the floor,
Gerard,
sir.
Dr.
You can
Gerard,
have it for me, because I have a question to ask you as soon as you get done.
Dr. Gerard, I know you have the floor. I want us to not personalize and be disrespectful to one another.
Not disrespectful.
Everyone has their own opinion. Please do not, let's not personalize.
It's not
Please
personalized.
Please
It's
continue.
not personalized.
Well,
We're here, we're on a Friday night.
yes, we are.
Why?
We all are.
Why?
So let's just continue
I asked that question. Why are
on
we
the
here?
topic.
Why? Is it?
Sorry, did you?
I'm done for now, go ahead.
Okay, Ron?
Yeah, the first thing I would not is make any comments on the superintendent's recommendations, no matter what they are. This is not time for that. The second thing I want to ask, is that person here to talk to you about this?
What person?
The person that you referred to that said we were on a fast track, the head person for the.
You know who Milan Sonko is?
Yes, is he here?
She.
Is she here?
No.
Is that individual here?
Is she here? Is Milan here? No.
Okay, I just wanted to see, I wanted to talk to myself if she was here. And, that's it. But I wish we would stay on the topic and not refer to people at this, I wish we would stay on what this is all about and what the amendment may be, not personalize this with somebody who's sitting at the dais up there.
Yes.
I'd like to address another question regarding safety. In my public comments, I certainly went to Sacramento to the independent review panel also. In fact, I was the one who initially made contact with them, and then Trustee Borgioli followed up and actually developed a relationship with the people on the board. It was very, very helpful, which allowed me to have a discussion with the toxicologist on the independent review panel. And she was, I was very happy to hear when I talked about pink tennicus, she validated that and said, well, toxicology is going through a crisis. It's going through a crisis of paradigms. And something like looking at a threshold level of 0.034 mg per kg for Dialga. God bless you. Could be 10 years from now, 50 years from now, may really be outmoded. And so if we're looking at the future, we really need to look at what we're asking people to do, what we're actually measuring. So I'd just like to make that point first, that the work that, again, that Trustee Borgioli has referred to about the fact that there will be some Dialga left in the ground. We're not remediating by off-haul all of the Dialga. We're leaving quite a bit under the soil. We know that earthworms is well transported. There's 250,000 to 1 million earthworms. There's an article that was placed in the mitigated negative declaration about the fact that one of many studies about earthworms in Dialga, that earthworms are able to accept and ingest 45-year-old Dialga, 45-year-old Dialga. They will burrow down to 6 feet. They come up, they go down, they move around. They're living things, and there's a lot of them. So I just wanted to make that point. But a larger point that I was very frankly disturbed about when I read the revised mitigated negative declaration the other day was concerning the question of inundation and earthquakes. Now, I was really stunned because I am aware of the fact that in 2015, CEQA had a Supreme Court ruling in December that basically said that CEQA requires an analysis of the project's impacts on the environment, not the environment's impacts on the project. Requires. That's the operative word. CEQA does not require us to look at the environment's impact on the project. I.e., we have Anderson Dam. I went to the Anderson Dam, Santa Clara Valley Water District public meeting this spring. And I think the 100 or 200 people in the audience were kind of stunned and shocked by the fact that at that point, the dam was over 100% of capacity. And there was absolutely no way to get that water out except over a period of several months. And if we had an earthquake, the place where this particular school is located, within 5 minutes it would start to fill with water. 1 foot every 5 minutes. 1 foot every 5 minutes. After 10 minutes, there's 2 feet of water. After 3 feet, after 50 minutes, 3 feet, and so on. It go up to like 25, 30 feet. And we're gonna have a parking lot there. We're gonna have cars there. And so if you want to talk about the impact of the project on the environment, which is what we can and should be looking at, if you can remember back to Hurricane Katrina, think about the floods and the cars going down the road and all kinds of things going. That's what we're facing. That's what we're facing in the event of an earthquake between now and 2020 or 2021. There is no plan, there's no EIR for the dam. It's going to be very, very complicated EIR. And I doubt that it'll even be in 2020. Maybe 2021, 2022 is already been postponed. And the reason why it was postponed is because an additional study was made that showed that the prior study of the dam did not account for the actual construction of where the dam is, because now they have to take almost the entire dam down because it's all set to buckle and it's aged. It's basically a mud kind of dam. It's a very, very primitive kind of structure. We are at risk here in Morgan Hill. And so I was disturbed that the district chose, through their consultant, SSS, to go the quick and dirty route of going with what DPSC and SEQ would require as opposed to what we could do. Because footnote number 12 in the 2015 Supreme Court ruling says that the court actually invites and encourages an applicant such as us to actually have a higher standard, to actually talk about the environmental impact of existing environmental hazards on the project itself, i.e. the dam. And I was very, very disturbed because if you'll remember, if you read the original CEQA, Mitigated Neighborhood Declaration, they had really a true piece of folly. They said in the event of an earthquake, first of all, or dam failure, they said, they would expect that the city would probably call them and let them know that the dam was starting to dissipate. Yeah, that's really likely. And that the evacuation route would be to go to Jackson Academy. That's just amazing. That's really just amazing. If you look at the city plan for evacuation route for that neighborhood, it's not to go south, it's to go north, if you can. And so I'm very, very disgusted that once again, we're going for the quick and dirty route, just like we're using off-wall instead of something like bioremediation, which is a longer-term solution. We're doing the same to our kids with the inundation situation. So it was very, very disturbing to see that. By the way, if I were a parent at, let's say, El Toro, or Barrett, or Live Oak, well, I live around El Toro, and I know that for me, if that dam split a couple months ago, within 20 minutes, my house would be inundated. I'm just a mile and a half down the road. So to build a school in that location without the dam retrofitted, which it won't be till about 2025, I think is not only short-sighted, I think it's immoral. I think it's immoral. It's immoral to do this. Because what we're doing is we're putting property over people. We're putting cash over kids. And this is not free land. This is not free land. This is land that we must remediate. We trustees, back in September, we actually voted rather short-sightedly, I think, on a resolution that basically said, let's take escrow as soon as the environmental situations are basically resolved here. So we're now in a box. We're in a box right now. And it's something that we need to look at what we're doing here. We need to take a step back from the technicalities and look at the bigger picture of what could happen. There's a reason why there's a question about inundation on the CEQA document and why they didn't take it off after 2015. Because they are inviting us to take the higher standard, not to do what's required, but to do what's best. This is a school. This is not a shopping mall or a housing development. We don't have a burning need for more classrooms next year. We don't have that. And we all know there are other options here in Morgan Hill to build schools. And the neighborhood doesn't want it. And they're telling us that the 243 homes that the Barone family, that Chris Barone, who's the project manager, is selling and developing, they're not gonna send their kids to this school. So this is gonna cause more traffic. It's gonna create potential fire hazards, earthquake hazards, evacuation hazards. It's gonna totally change the nature of the neighborhood for no reason. You know, I believe that my point of view will not win tonight, unfortunately. But nonetheless, I think, like Trustee Borgioli, I think it's very clear for us to take a moral stand tonight. Because certainly, if there is a disaster, or if anybody even gets sick, like they did in Encinitas a few years ago, where they had these dust controls. They had the wetting down of the soil. And 16 people in the neighborhood in Encinitas, around a parcel half the size of this, got sick. And their pets got sick. So, you know, we can close our eyes. We can take the quick and dirty route. We can do that. And we can just vote, go ahead, approve it, send the machines in there, and we will live to regret it. I warn you, you will live to regret it if you vote to go forward with this. Expediency is not what we should be thinking about. We should be thinking long-term, what is best for the children, what's best for this little community that these people have worked very, very hard to be able to move into and live into, and I think they should have that right as American citizens. So let's use our big mind here and not just get mired down in the technical details. Although I have to appreciate what Trustee Borgioli did, because I bet if he had enough time with his background in measurement, he'd go through this document and pick out 5 or 6 other areas and do the same fine job. So thank you, Trustee Borgioli. I do appreciate it. And I think the community does as well.
Want to address something?
Yeah, I had a few of those.
Thank you.
I was trying to keep track of them since we were making points. So, with regards, I'll go back in backwards order. Speaking directly to the flood inundation dam, and you're correct. CEQA doesn't address our impact on the environment, not the environment's impact on us. That's FEMA. And so when we build projects, like most of Morgan Hill, we're in a flood zone. So all new buildings, like the hotels that are building downtown, all have to be built 3 feet above a certain grade, and it's all dictated. There's a book on it when civil engineers build buildings. So with regards specifically to the ideas of flood, and you know, in talking about with our planners, if anything, if we did build a school here, and when the school is built, it will probably likely be one of the islands in the middle of all the different residences. All residences will be impacted if there was that second catastrophic failure. But yeah, to be correct, it isn't the CEQA. It's FEMA and our civil engineers when they design the floodplains. It's all through there. So and then with regards to earthquake measures, we report not to the city for building permits. We report to the Division of City Architect, who has all the seismic codes that any new building has to be built in California to those codes, and all schools are built to DSA standards for earthquake. Just want to be clear, the governing agencies, which that is not this document CEQA, that is actually the Division of City Architect and the FEMA's portion of the design. And with regards to comment on the comments of both trustees regarding the awful method being quicker, it is quicker. It is also something when the staff analyzed it, myself and our consultants, it was safer. And I think when we looked at all the schools, I could not find one school in California that has done any kind of bioremediation on their campus. All the schools that had done in the studies that were issued in the last, I think it was 5 years, and I think I provided that document in the first time we had started talking about it, all mentioned that awful was done. And while I'm not a toxicologist, when I look at history of those procedures by other school districts and with boards such as yourselves and staff such as myself, not one of them had done bioremediation. Maybe take a second look at the efficacy of bioremediation. And I won't pretend that I know everything about toxicology, but that was sort of a determining factor of alcohol. And just to be clear, you know, if we were to do nothing, you know, the property in one way or another will be developed at one point. The property to the north is already going through their alcohol method and is going to be going through that. So if it's a factor of what is safe for children and what is safe, I mean, the rigor that we are held to as a school district is much higher than that of the amount of hoops that we have to go through and all the regulations that we have is much different than a residential developer. So I just like to throw that out there when we talk about danger in kids and who are oversight. We have so many agencies that oversight everything we do.
Thank you.
If I can make a reply.
I think Mary would like.
Well, I mean, just for time to speak, if I may. I don't know who's gonna buy houses in this neighborhood after all the information we have here. I think if I were the developer, what I would do is I would use bioremediation, and they do work. And there's actually geotechnical engineers who live in Morgan Hill. There's one who's doing it, who has done it, and NASA has just published a paper. So technology is changing, and you know, a lot of the proven technologies that DTSC has were designed in 2008. It's 2017, folks. We're in Silicon Valley. So that's all I'll say. But I mean, I'm not a toxicologist, but like Trustee Borgioli, I'm looking for answers here, and I am very disturbed when I see.
I'll just toss in, I went to the sales office and they're sold out. They're sold out. They're opening their next, the next phase in September, October. So they're selling. Mary, you were next.
Yeah, I just want to say that.
They're not informed. I wasn't informed, and I have a house right next to the lot.
Okay.
And I'm selling my house because of this. I'm selling my
All right,
house.
Got, Mr.
No,
Harrison.
it's important to hear us.
I do.
I know you.
I do.
I'm selling my house. I have 3 kids. After all this hearing, I cannot stay there. They're starting construction next month, moving the dirt. I'm out. I cannot stay there. After listening to this, I have 3 kids. 6-year-old, 4-year-old, a 50-month baby. I live right across the street. I understand I had 3 minutes to talk, but I'm so fed up with all this
No, I
conversation.
understand. So afterwards.
Would you
we
live
could
there?
meet-
Would you be living in my house if you're?
Afterwards, we could meet and talk more about it, but the board needs to finish the
Okay.
conversations.
I understand. Sorry about that, but.
We'll go through this.
We're all frustrated. We appreciate that. When I looked through the health, so there's a significant section on the health requirements for all the levels of all the aspects of the soil that we looked at, and they seem to me to be exceedingly stringent, exceedingly specific, and that just led me to I was remembering that I find it rather extraordinary that the folks who've been working on this took all these comments, all this data, and I very much appreciate the addition by Christine Hildebrand of a couple of additional articles that DTSC and the other folks that worked on it responded in 10 days. So if I recall, the comment period ended on August 7th. They must have begun compiling on August 8th. It's now August 18th. So in 10 days, these folks who've been doing this for decades came forward with comments and responses, some overly sufficient and overly adequate, some maybe not what we exactly wanted, but I think it was quite remarkable, not to mention the work of the staff in pulling this all together and getting it posted, so I want to thank you guys for that. I feel like we make a lot of decisions in the state of California. Many decisions are made every single day on where to build and how to build and how to keep people safe, not just school children, but those of us who are homeowners, home renters, etc. And so we all are weighing a lot of factors in our lives every single day. Every decision that we make, I as a parent, driving myself to and from work, where I choose to live, the house I chose to buy, and all of the dangers and risks that are inherent in my neighborhood as well. So I think that's why it's so frustrating, but we all are very experienced at that. Many of us in this room are parents, so we're very experienced at making these kinds of decisions about what we're gonna do, what exposure we're going to take. So, I appreciate the conversation, discussion, and the research. The last thing I'll say is that the discussion, thank you, Dr. Gerard, mentioning inundation. Might not be the place, but I did want to say that when the dam was 100% full, of course, the neighborhood of Los Paseos and Martin Murphy were also very concerned. And I would like to see in a future item that we need to look at, the dam is only at 55 or 60% right now, but because at the North Coyote Valley, the necking down of the valley, the water rushes through that area right into Martin Murphy and Los Paseos at a much deeper rate because there's less surface area for the water to pass through. So at some point in the future, I would like to make sure that we have plans. We have more time, a longer warning in the South San Jose area, but the water will be deeper at Murphy and Los Paseos. So I'd like to make sure we address that in the future. Sorry if I took the wrong place to say that.
It's unbelievable, nobody mentioned the gas line that goes across there. 36-inch gas line. That to me is not even the power lines, forget the power lines. So you gotta be 100 feet, fine, you're 100 feet. What about the gas line, 36-inch gas line? Can you imagine if something happens there? An engineer from PG&E, a friend of mine, told me I would not live, I would even buy a house right on top of the line. Imagine a school. Can you imagine a school? But anyways.
Are there any other last
Yeah,
comments?
I want to, Mary, you mentioned the 78-inch pipeline. It's on page 318, and if you read the last paragraph, it also says that it warrants further evaluation by CDE. So it may not be at the 12-inch level, but it still says warrants, and this is one of the experts, it warrants further evaluation. So should we ignore that? On page 312, this is the 12-inch line, I believe, and talks about a large magnitude earthquake, but that also says that there's a trigger that could warrant further evaluation by CDE. So
Yeah.
are we to ignore
We have a
that?
response, don't we?
Yeah, sure.
Well, you're probably gonna give me some excuse. All I'm saying is, the document is saying it should warrant further evaluation by California Department of Education.
Would you like an answer to the question, should we ignore that? Or?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
so.
No, so we have some information.
Yes, there. That's the short of it. So plans get submitted to CDE for approval and get reapproved, and this MND will be sent to them for consideration. Because there are comments that were made even in our preliminary studies where CDE has been multiple times to give us even preliminary site approval before we even started any process with regards to going further with any kind of phase 1 environmental site assessment. So yes, all those lines will be, and actually, I believe, going back to your previous comment, Gino, the 14 days that the Santa Clara Valley Water District asked for was specifically in regards to their project they have going on, I believe. I know they commented and we responded to comments specifically to our project, but they had their own MND going on, and I think that they have like a warehouse or something they're building on their easement, and so they wanted to see, I have to get the back that was specific to us for that time. So when we responded, it was that, we were specifically working on the project.
So, first of all, I want to just give some of my thinking as I've wrestled with this issue. And I want to point out, this is not an easy issue. This is not something that I think any of us have taken lightly or been dismissive about. But before I make some comments, I want to say thank you also to the community members that emailed us, that reached out to us. In particular, I want to mention Ms. Claudia Cibrian. Sent me an email today where she laid out some very thoughtful analysis of her thoughts on the MND, on the raw. I take, as a trustee, I take effort to read through the documents we're given, but I'll say candidly, because these are not, because this isn't my full-time job, because I'm not retired or self-employed like some of my colleagues, I depend on community feedback in order to understand these issues. And, you know, there's a lot of issues that we have to consider, not just this issue. And so I just want to say for that reason, I really appreciate community members like Claudia and, you know, others who sent us emails as well, who took the time, you know, to go deep on this issue and send us their thoughts. And I want to invite, you know, community members in the future. You know, I welcome your thoughts, your feedback on these issues. One other thing I want to say too, relative to those comments, is that I appreciated the respectful and thoughtful tone of Claudia's comments. That it was very much laying out the arguments of these are the specific points that I have concerns about, this is the analysis I've done. I find that much more helpful for helping me weigh these decisions than, frankly, some of the other emails we've received that are more of a belligerent or harassing, bullying tone, you know, that try and, I think, intimidate us into making decisions by, you know, by intimidation. But I just want to say I appreciate the community members who sent those thoughtful comments. Now, the general comment I want to make relative to this issue, as I've thought about it, is that this really comes down to risk. Comes down to you know, the bigger picture is risk. How do we handle risk? How do we mediate risk? And risks are scary. The Eldrin and the potential implications it could have are scary. A gas line is scary. A dam flooding, those are scary things. Risks are scary. But I also want to point out that, you know, life is inherently risky. When you get in a car and drive on the freeway, you're taking a risk that some crazy person could crash into you. You're taking a risk that you're breathing in air that has fumes in it from the other cars. When you go out in the sun, you're exposed to UV rays. It's risky. When you go in public amongst people who could, you know, be carrying contagious diseases, you're taking risk. When you vaccinate your kids, you're taking risk. I had a friend in high school who was bedridden for 2 years because of a bad reaction to a vaccine. When you don't vaccinate your kids, you're taking risks that they could get exposed to, you know, diseases that otherwise are totally preventable due to the benefits of modern medicine. And I just want to point out that we can't eliminate all risks. It's unreasonable to think that we can eliminate all types of risks from these projects. And our job is not to try and eliminate risks. I think it's really to try and mediate the risks and decide what is the appropriate level of risk that we feel comfortable with as a community taking as we move forward with this project. And making sure that those risks are, you know, extremely conservative, extremely reasonable before we move forward. You know, when I look at the RAW, I think some people mischaracterize that as a document about building on a toxic site. The RAW is not about building on a toxic site. It's about a plan to remediate the risks that that toxins would otherwise pose to our students. Now that being said, like over the last few months, we've had the DTSC meeting. I've received emails from others. There's been a lot of community discussion. And I think there are some legitimate concerns, some issues with some of the plans that I think are worth noting. You know, in particular, the one that stands out in my mind is trying to understand how did the Eldrin come back after the remediation back in 2005. To me, that's still a mystery, and it's a mystery. I don't know. We may never know. You know, I was incredulous when at the DTSC meeting they mentioned that the land had been resprayed. That doesn't seem logical to me that would have happened. You know, I'm not totally convinced by other hypotheses that are floating out there about how it could have come back. You know, and I think in terms of the safety issues with the off-haul method, I think there's people that have raised questions about potential risks involved in the off-haul, and I think some of those are worth noting. But I will say, you know, after wrestling with this issue, thinking about it, reviewing the RAW, reviewing the MND, they're not perfect documents, but as I read them, they're documents that I feel comfortable with. I can say, honestly, I would feel comfortable if we went forward with these plans, sending my kids to a school that's built on that site. But I also realize other people in our community have different levels of toleration and acceptance for risk. Just because I feel comfortable sending my children there doesn't mean that everyone has to agree with me. You know, I'm not someone who eats organic foods. I'm not someone who, you know, avoids downhill skiing. You know, I take risks in my life, and the risks that I take may not be risks that other people are willing to take. A big thing that's influenced my thinking on this, Daniel Kahneman, who is a Nobel laureate. He's a professor of psychology, but earned the Nobel Prize in economics for studying cognitive bias, for uncovering the ways in which people's cognitive biases influence their decision-making, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. And he has a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. And in that book, they talk about almost this exact issue of the public's scare of toxins in the environment. And one of the points he makes out, which I think I see happening here, is that these risks, because they scare us, because they affect us emotionally, we have elevated attention that we pay to these risks. And then we can get caught in these, what he calls, cascades, where, between, people in the community advocating for an issue, getting increased raised attention on social media or in the newspaper, like that risk and that fear of the risk can build to a level that really exceeds the actual risk that we're handling. And in some ways, I wonder if we see that here. And so, but in the end of this chapter where he talks about these types of risks, he points out, it's frustrating at times to see public officials who are experts on an issue, who have worked to make sure that their decisions are informed and not driven by cognitive bias, that those decisions can get derailed by the fears of the public. But he also makes this comment. He says that he believes that widespread fears, even if they are unreasonable, should not be ignored by policymakers. Rational or not, fear is painful and debilitating, and policymakers must endeavor to protect the public from fear, not only from real danger. As I've considered this, I think it's our duty, given the fact that different people have different levels of toleration for risk, the risks involved in this project. I think we have a duty to our community not just to accept the risks that are comfortable for Tom Arnett, or the risks that are comfortable for anyone else on this board. We need to make sure that we're considering how other people in the community feel about the risks that we're taking. And hopefully get to a point where everyone can feel comfortable with the level of risk that we decide to take. The other thing I consider in all of this is the trust that we have with the public. I think we as a board need to also consider that our success as a district depends not just on whether we have facilities to house our students in, and whether we have those facilities in particular neighborhoods. It really depends on trust. Our ability to attract families to enroll their kids in our schools depends on earning their trust. Our ability to invite people to be engaged and involved members of their school communities depends on how well we maintain their trust. And a real particular issue, I think, current for us is our ability to pass something like a partial tax. Depends on the trust level that we have with the community. I would say that even if a majority of us feel comfortable with these plans, I think if we move forward right now, while some members of our community are vocal about feeling extremely anxious about these plans, I worry that we do damage to our greater purpose, which is serving the community, and that we do damage by hurting the trust that we have with that community. So anyway, my hope is that we can move forward and make progress, not get stuck in deadlock. As a board, a majority of us could vote tonight to keep moving forward with these plans. But as I reflect on this, I personally think it would be wise, in order to maintain that trust with our community, to do some additional work with on the plans that we have. We've held our required community meetings, we've solicited public comments, we've prepared responses to those comments, but I think for this project to really be successful, I think we need to take some additional time to sit down with some of the people who are most concerned about this, people like Claudia, who, like I said, her email to me seemed it felt intellectually honest. Some of the emails I've received, not so much. I think there's some people who have committed to fighting this issue, and because of that strategy, they're not really looking for the truth or for what's reasonable. They're looking for, how can I look for every single reason I can to cast doubt on this? And I think if that's the place we're operating from, I don't know how we make progress. But I am hopeful that we can work together as a community, not just to do what we need to in order to be compliant with state policy. And I personally give a lot of credit to the state policies that are set by experts who are deeply committed to these issues. But I think beyond just making sure that we're dotting all our I's and crossing all our T's to do what the state requires of us, I think there's some additional effort we can do to make sure that the people who are legitimately scared or legitimately concerned, who are also intellectually honest and willing to find solutions, that we work with them to help make sure that this is something that we can move forward on as a community together, and it won't undermine the trust that we as a board or we as a district have with our community.
Thank you. Are there any other comments?
Well, I do because I have to. Thank you, Tom. I'm a psychologist, and I value emotion as well as cognition. In fact, I think that's what emotional intelligence is all about. And I frankly think that by and large, the people in the community that I've been talking to, I don't see any evidence of cognitive bias. I don't see that. I don't think you're deluded by that. I think in the main, many of you are engineers, you're scientists, you're professionals. I respect you. I certainly want to second what Tom said regarding Claudia. Outstanding. In fact, you've been an inspiration to me during dark times when I thought there was absolutely no hope to delay the school or take another look at it, as Tom is suggesting. So I just want to commend the community, and I certainly want to have a very strong relationship with the community. It has to be based on an equal footing. And I think what has exemplified this project, unfortunately, has been, for example, tonight. This is absolutely ridiculous. We would schedule a meeting of such import on a Friday night when just a few blocks away there was a wonderful concert that many of our community are going to. It's also a Friday night where it's a family time. And this is not the first time this has happened. The other meeting we had in July and in June was on a 3 p.m. on June 27th. And those of you who work, you couldn't attend. So I totally support what Tom is saying here. We do need to take another look at this. I would like to find some kind of a consensus. And therefore we cannot rush forward. We must take a step back. We must do that. And we must push the aggressive building plans aside, allow time for the community to look and to get even more involved. We have a small core of people who've been very active, and I think that some of them have overstepped their bounds in terms of maybe not being as polite. I think they're frustrated, but they're good people. These are good people. These are not nut jobs. These are people who care. And I would rather I come from a small town in Connecticut where you should see the kind of fights that we have at our town meetings. That's how I grew up. That's what democracy is. So I think that I certainly read that book you're talking about, and I think that emotion is not a bad thing. We're not all totally cerebral. And emotion gives us the motivation and the will to act. So let us come together as a board and let us find an alternative to the present plan of moving and rushing forward on a Friday night. So thank you, Tom.
Any other last brief comments?
Well, I want to make clear, I'd like to see us move forward on this, but in terms of the process for how that happens, I'm not sure what that would look like. So here's from staff.
Yeah, so I think we can address that because after we put the plans in place, hopefully the board will approve going forward with it, then we will include community groups in on that, from the neighborhood, from those that would be in the attendance boundaries. I think we sent out notices to, I want to say 400 homes?
Yeah. Yeah, our standard procedure is to, even when we do normal development on existing school sites, to continually apprise the community of what's going on and again, build that trust. I mean, your point of building trust, I mean, I grew up here in Morganville, I've been here forever, and part of the stakeholdership of just being a father, you have to do that. It's not an option. So yeah, I think we continually do that back and forth. In fact, we've met with the Borellos. I went to school with the Borellos who donated part of the land whose namesake is in the school, and they're very interested in meetings with them about the history of the property and how they've always wanted to support children and in their residence or in their business with the orchards and the fruit trees. And they said this is always something they thought about. And so I think that we've also involved them, so that it's not something that's come up in the topic, but comment to you about trust and really. But that is part of that process. And again, and you know, as we steward the process forward, I mean, we talked a little about trust, and I just like to comment on that. You know, as a school district, as myself as staff, I mean, I would trust myself more than a developer, nothing against developers or anything like that, but we have resources and tools at our disposal to do things that other folks can't. Even with the comments and being critical of data and science, I mean, we actually have the resources to do if those things are available. I don't know if anybody else could to the degree that we can.
What kind of, in particular, what kind of resources are you referring to?
Well, we have a large field of consultants. We have many different consultants that have expertise, and we also have the resources, the financial resources to do a premium method of off-fall, which is more expensive than some other methods. Those alone, plus along with the huge resources of the district of reach out to parents and our human resources that are available. So,
Our remediation of the soil is actually something that I think the developer in that area for the new homes is going to do as well, because it's more extensive than they might be required to do. So I think that that's also having a positive effect on the way they're remediating the soil for the 9 homes that are going right there to the north of the property. So that work with the developer and in the interest of the people that live in that neighborhood is our, and that's based on our work.
So to return real quick, in terms of what I think we should do or need to do to build that trust, I appreciate that we have processes in place like having community meetings to try to facilitate that. But I do worry that just executing the process of having a meeting may not be enough. I think it's probably going to involve leadership from the district, reaching out to particular individuals and sitting down and having coffee and saying, let's really talk about
There were
this.
a couple of people, or at least one lady who laughed that I spent time with afterwards, and I think that was great for both of us, because I got to hear her deep concerns, also to explain some things that were not necessarily true, that she had heard from somewhere, that, kind of explain processes and things like that. So I think you're exactly right, the face-to-face meetings, and I will certainly commit to that.
I know during this process, many of us have met, with neighbors who wanted to meet and talk. And, I think we're all very sincere in our diligence and listening. And I appreciate the comments. I think there's always more work, and inclusion is certainly the goal. Are we ready to make a motion? Ron?
Yes, I'm still a little bit concerned about the city alternatives involving the city's plans and things like that. So this is the motion I want to come up with. I move that we adopt a resolution to approve the findings and adoption of the mitigated negative declaration with the city suggested alternative comments and responses in mitigation monitoring program and approval of the Borrello Elementary School project.
Do we have a second?
Could you read that again, Ron?
I'm a little bit confused on
Sure.
what he's trying to say.
Okay, so there's two alternatives. There's two alternatives. We had the recommendation from staff, the city, after discussions and actually several sit-down meetings with groups, is the city came up with an alternative that we also met with the neighborhood to discuss, and he's making the recommendation on that alternative.
Yeah, I have, I wasn't aware of that until I came to the meeting tonight. So I guess what I'm doing is I'm making the motion to approve this also with city suggested alternatives. In other words, what they have stated to us tonight, because I don't believe that was originally part of the project.
Correct, those were in response to the comments. So when we drafted the MND and circulated it for the 30 days, the city commented with their staff regarding the improvements to Mission Avenue. Specifically, the alternative, the difference between the base mitigated negative declaration and what specifically the city commented on was the usage of a kindergarten drop-off area on Mission Avenue. We had only shown it as staff lot, so in the alternative, we would be shifting staff to Beat Road and providing capacity for kindergarten children parking on Mission Avenue.
So, do we have so I'll second Ron's motion.
I'm kind of a little bit concerned about this motion, because are we approving before we are approving, we're approving this?
No, it's the same
This
motion.
is part of the motion.
Yeah, it's part of the motion.
Yeah, it's all.
Good question.
All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Can we
So
have
do
roll
we
call
have-
please on those nays?
Yeah.
I think we have
Gino?
Teresa,
David.
and
Okay, thank you.
David.